So I'm here with Sandra Riley. I'm so proud to be here actually because Sandra used to teach at my alma mater, Coral Gables High School. She is a playwright and author, and she lives in South Miami, and she's written a book about the two legendary female pirates of the Caribbean, Bonny and Mary Read. Sandra, can you tell us a little bit about these two women? Did they really exist?
Yes, yes they did. And the first person to write about them was Captain Johnson in his History of the Pirates in the early 1700s, 1724. His book was published. Big long history, and he gets into every one of the pirates.
So even in 1724 they were doing research on pirates?
Well, he ran into them by personal, let me say this. As I started to do the research on the Bahamas in 1973 and 74, I was working for a land company on San Salvador in the Bahamas, and they wanted to know about the Columbus, of course. Then they wanted to know about the pirates because they thought that a pirate visited there. And they wanted to know about the American loyalists who were exiled there after the Revolutionary War. And while I was doing that research, I came across these two women, and I was just absolutely taken. I thought, I couldn't believe it, because I had never read anything as a young person about these two women or about pirates. I really wasn't interested. But when I discovered these two women, I thought, oh my God, they had to be incredible women.
Absolutely.
To have been in that situation at that time.
And what Sandra ended up doing was, you wrote a novel based
Right.
on their story and your research.
Right.
How do you think they pulled it off?
Well,
because that was a man's world.
It certainly was. I think they pulled it off by acting really tough. Maybe because they said at their trial, it was brought out at their trial, that they were as fierce, if not fiercer, than the men who boarded the ships. These are the two captains or the masters of the ships that they boarded near Jamaica. And they said they were worse, and swore and carried on. And so they were dressed as men at that time. And I think it was maybe a compensation, so that they would frighten the whole idea of piracy and the pirates, not to kill people as their main goal, but to just make them call quarter, and they could take what they wanted.
Kind of inspire.
And so they
fear
and dread. And the man who, this Captain Johnson in this History of 1724, it came out later on, when 73, when I was researching. I read everything in the early 1920s, 30s, 40s about these pirates, and they all had the same story. And then I come to find out when I'm at the public library, the rare book room of the public library in New York. No, in New York. I had to travel. This was before the internet. You had to travel.
No Google or Wikipedia.
Yes, and I came across that. I came across that book there, and I in London, at the Public Records Office, I found their transcript of their trial. And I had that copied. I had only Summers, so I couldn't delve deeper. And I should have gone into the newspapers of the time and to verify these stories. But it was in 1970, I read this dissertation from somebody at the University of Michigan, my alma mater.
It's called Piracy Examined, a study of Daniel Defoe's general history of the pirates.
And so he is figuring that this Captain Johnson was Daniel Defoe.
Oh.
And this is 1970. And then finally there was a reprint. Of course, I had to use the original in the library. There wasn't a reprint such as this. Then from the University of South Carolina came this book, and this came a little, Daniel Defoe, A General History of the Pirates, edited by Manuel Schornhorn from the University of Carolina Press. And he is making the same, this is 1972, so it was only a couple years after this, and he's saying the same thing. Now today, they try to debunk that.
This is scholarship, people.
That's it.
Primary documents.
Primary.
Fact checking. Thank you.
That's it. That's it, exactly. And of course, today the people who are writing about the pirates, and I met a couple of them, David Cordingley, and there are others who think that it wasn't that Daniel Defoe wouldn't have that knowledge of seamanship. But after all, if what we know of him, he was a novelist.
Yes, please tell my listeners
Yes.
who Daniel Defoe was,
And
they might not know that.
Well, Robinson Crusoe fame.
Yes.
Yes, and several Ma Flanders and several novels of that time period. But he was a journalist mainly, and he wrote for the newspapers, and he wrote for the journals of the time, and he interviewed people, and he said in this history that he interviewed people who returned from their trial in Jamaica,
Oh, of course.
which was 1720.
Yes.
And I believe there's a lot of satire in there, and he was a satirist.
Yeah.
And during that time period, it was common that the writers would use pseudonyms. Peggy told me that. Yeah, who's holding the camera here. So, but I was just thrilled, and so I got right into writing, and I couldn't, and all of these stories and all of these books that I read on piracy that I could find up until that, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, all said the same story, and the story that they cribbed from was the history of the pirates. They all told the same